Hey everyone, I'm Guillermo, Head of Research at Bain Capital Crypto, and today we have David Wong, co-founder of zkSecurity and author of a great book called Real-World Crypto, which I would highly recommend everybody read. So today we'll be talking a little bit about MPC, or Multi-Party Computation. Recently we had a great chat about it, and I decided that it would actually be great if we could record a small set of lectures on MPC, and David explained it so well that I was like, we have to get this on camera. So, David, take it away.
Cool. So, yeah, I guess explaining things well to you is like the way to get in front of a camera.
For better or worse.
I'll try to avoid that next time. Okay, so multi-party computation. So the point of multi-party computation is to basically distribute the computation with multiple participants. If you don't trust one person to have like the secret or to have some of the input of a function you want to compute. So, I mean, very, very basic example. I don't want to get too much into the use cases, but you have a function, you have x1, x2, x3, and we want to compute that with a friend, for example.
Okay.
And this is my input, this is your input, and this is our friend input. Then we would use a multi-party computation to compute this thing together, right?
Okay. So I guess, for example, if the f was like
Equals
adding
something.
things together, right, x1 plus x2 plus x3, we could compute it with, I know my secret, you know something else, and a friend knows a different secret, and we could compute the sum without any of us knowing anybody else's, right? That's the high level idea.
For example.
Yeah, that would be one simple example. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then there's like all sorts of like security models, and like some schemes can support a small number of participants, some schemes can support larger number of participants. Some schemes are not great if you have too many malicious people. Some of them are great against malicious people that are not doing much, which we call honest but curious.
Okay.
Who follow the protocol but try to learn stuff about the protocol. So it's kind of complicated to like unbox all the properties of like these MPC schemes. But you have a bunch of like trade-offs and like choices and stuff like that. Just so that you're aware of the space. So I guess there's different way to sort of cut the space, like, you know, like ZK or like all these cryptographic fields. There's a bunch of constructions and it's kind of hard to organize things. But one way to, okay, let's do it here.
Yeah, please go ahead.
One way to break things is, or at least one way that I hear people talking about these things, is that on one side you have garbled circuits, and then on the other side you have these kind of, I guess, Shamir secrets, and I guess we can sort of intro what that means, Shamir secret sharing. But scheme based on Shamir secret sharing, or let's say SSS. Okay. And so usually GC works, I believe works better in like the two-party setting, if we're like two people.
Oh, interesting, okay.
And the Shamir secret sharing stuff usually works better with like many more participants or more participants. And also, from what I've seen more like binary schemes here. So your circuit is like, you know, binary gates, XORs, ANDs, and stuff like that. And here you can do that as well, but you can also do arithmetic circuits.
Oh, neat. Okay. So So more general.
In a field or something like that. From what I've seen, most of the schemes are usually introduced with like a base version, and then there's a way to make them, and the base version is always like insecure, and then there's a way to make them, I guess, secure by having the authenticated version.
So the authenticated, there's like an unauthenticated version which is not secure, and then there's an authenticated version which is secure, or is this authenticated something else?
So this is sort of like insecure, and the authenticated version is secure.
Okay.
And you have the same thing here. You have a way to make it authenticated. And so here, when you hear authenticated, what you should think about is that we might compute a circuit together, right? But I might lie about some of the values.
Okay.
And if operations are not authenticated, then nobody has a way to like know that I lied about that.
Okay.
So you might get an incorrect result, and so it doesn't make too much sense without these authenticated versions of the schemes are the versions that people use. Right?
Sorry. So insecure here means something like I have some private data. Of course, since you don't know my private data, I could lie about what it actually was.
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
So if you think of a circuit as like, you know, input 1, input 2, input 3, and we have like some arithmetic gates.
So this is essentially x1 plus x2, and then x1 plus x2
is
all
multiplied
times x3.
by x3.
And we get y, okay.
And we get y. So what we want to do is like compute these operations together, go through the circuit together. At any point in time, we're going to get intermediary values. And so I can lie about that as well, depending if I will share it to you or something like that, or I can lie about the last value also.
Okay.
And so what we really want to do is, I mean, the trick, spoiler alert, but every gate here will sort of do the operation and also do the authenticate operation. And at the end, you will get these and some sort of like message authentication code that things were done correctly.
Nice, okay, I see. So essentially it's just like, the one way to think about it is we have this version where it's, if everyone's truthful, of course it will work. You have no guarantee that everyone's truthful, so we can append this kind of MAC in this case in order to be able to ensure that indeed the computation was done correctly.
Right, and this is all I'll say about that for now.
That's great.
But usually things can be simple until you reach the authentication like compiler or like phase or whatever. And there's another thing that also gets complicated here, but maybe I'm not gonna explain that now, but just as a spoiler also. These schemes come with the pre-processing, sort of like in ZK as well.
Okay,
pre-processing. And so basically you can pre-compute a bunch of stuff to make these things more efficient during runtime, or what they call online. So they have like this online phase and pre-processing phase. And so because you can pre-compute a bunch of stuff, you can make these schemes more efficient, but this pre-computation stuff is like also an MPC protocol, and it's very involved.
I see, okay.
But yeah, this is just to give you an idea of like, what are the things that we can talk about. And I think now is a good time to, unless you have questions, now is a good time to like dig more into how we do MPC on arithmetic circuits. All right, so this is arithmetic circuits, right? Arithmetic.
Okay.
And so it's just a circuit made of addition and multiplication gates, right? And so one way we want to, so also just to note, some stuff might not be inputs that we want to hide. Maybe these things are constants also, like let's take this example. And sometimes we also have this thing where sometimes an input is something provided by participants, but sometimes another input might be a secret key, which is shared amongst the participants. So we have different use cases that we want to address.
So a secret key here that's shared among the participants means that does it mean that everybody knows a secret key, or does it mean that nobody knows a secret key, but they can compute the secret key if they all come together?
Exactly. So nobody knows the secret key, and I'll talk more about that, especially with this scheme, which is interesting. But yeah, these are the sort of like different inputs that you get, and we always assume that there's one output. Okay, the basic way to understand this is to think about it this way. Imagine we're two people, right? And I want us to compute these gates. Actually, I'm gonna go back to, we have two inputs. And what I'm gonna do is my inputs, so P1 has X1, okay, that's my inputs. I'm gonna share it in an additive way. So I'm gonna say X1 is equal to X1 plus X1 2.
Okay, so X1 has, so this is two private values that are kept by player one, or?
For now, right? I'm just saying that I can, and if there were more participants, I could do like more values. These are called shares also. And these shares, when summed up together, represent or give you the actual value, right? It's just an addition of like a bunch of values that probably look random, but when you add all of them, we get back the value. I do that on my side. I keep one for myself, and then I send you one of them. Okay, we all have private channels also. I'm gonna try not to talk about networking and stuff like that, but you can assume that during an MPC, we can all communicate with each other. Right? So you get one of the share, I get one of the share. If at any point in time we want to recombine or recover the actual value, we can just open stuff and broadcast these values, these shares, and everybody can compute the sum of them and recover the value.
X1. Okay. Yeah.
Makes
yes.
sense?
So another way of saying it essentially is x11 and x12 is, okay, we have this like shared secret, so to speak, right? X1. Let's say I'm player one, right? And how would I split this up into two things? I would add randomness to x1 and then give you the negative of that randomness, right?
Yeah, you could do that. You could
So that would be,
generate some randomness, and then you could do minus r. Your own share could be minus r plus x1. That's what you're saying, right?
And then you give player two, you give positive r. And so when you, of course, add those together, you get r minus r plus x1. And so you recover the share. That's one example. I don't know if that's...
Yeah, that's actually probably how people implement that.
Okay.
That's how I implement it.
Okay.
But for now, let's just assume that there's a way. I don't know if it was visible for a camera, but yeah, that should be good. So the way we write these kind of things, usually we write these as box values. And whenever you see that, you can assume that this value is shared amongst the participants.
I see.
It's just a notation, and it's practical in a number of cases, but yeah,
Great.
I would mention it. So now imagine that we want to add x1 plus x2, right? These two values here, to obtain the shared value x1 plus x2.
That's right. Yep.
I guess this is like not the greatest notation, but let's do it like this. X is like x1 plus x2.
Great.
And then we want to add it with y.
Make that y? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that'll be easier.
Right.
Oh. So what you're saying is that...
Is that I would add x1 and y1.
Well, no, because you're participant number 2.
Oh, sorry, you're participant number 1. Okay,
right.
fine. So I would add x2 and y2 and report that.
P2 does, right, x2 plus y2.
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And that is the share of this value here.
Correct.
So what we say is that addition is for free because you can compute it locally.
Yep. It requires no additional communication between us for me to compute kind of like what my corresponding share. Yeah.
Right.
So it's funny, it's interesting. So a share here is like, the idea is to think about it is a thing that like when we add it together to all the other shares, we recover the original value, right? Is that right?
Or an additive share, like it's shared additively.
Okay, or an additive share. So essentially like my version of that is I can construct that value for me as player 2 by just adding the two values that I have together. And that's why you say it comes for free. We have to do no additional communication. I don't have to send you anything.
Exactly.
I can just locally add the two things that I know together and get their sum.
Because we have to, so I guess I didn't talk about that, but everything that's expensive in MPCs, or most of the expensiveness of MPCs comes from the communication.
Right.
So as long as we don't communicate between each other, we're good. So that's for free and we're happy, right?
Okay.
And you can imagine the same is true if you want to do scaling.
Also, do we want to rewrite x1 and x2 up there in the circuit to x and then y?
Yeah, let's do that. Up, x, y.
And then z or something.
And then, yeah, up.
Great.
So, okay, imagine here we have a scaling, but we're just going to pretend that this is x. Or yeah, let's just say x. And you want to scale it by 3.
Yep.
How do you do that?
I feel you just do the same thing. You just locally scale your share by 3. So I would multiply my share by 3, right? Right.
So your share is x2 in this case. We don't want to do an addition. We wanted to, maybe I'll add it to the circuit. Right? That's what you want to do here. Then what you would do is, like you said, multiply your share.
Okay. And why does that work? I mean, I know why it works.
Why does that work?
Probably write it out.
So when you want to open this, you'll broadcast this value.
Sure, 3 times my share.
Right. I'll broadcast this value, which I've computed locally.
Your share, okay.
And then you can
add them together. Okay.
You can do this. Right?
Yep.
Using the magic of math.
That's right. And of course, x2 plus x1 gives us x. So at the end of the day, we recover 3x, which is exactly what we wanted to compute up here, right?
Right.
Cool.
Right.
Okay. Perfect.
I guess there is one, maybe one use case that's not super useful to think about. Maybe I'll leave it to you to think about it for later.
Okay.
But if you want to do x plus 3, then it's
Oh, that gets spicy.
easy way to do it is that only one participant adds
the
three,
yeah.
and usually the first participant does it.
Okay.
Or you can choose them randomly, as long as everybody agrees. And so yeah, we'll have, let's say you don't do it, but I do it with my share.
Yep.
Right? Then when we add these two things, we
Then
indeed
of
have
course.
x plus 3. Right?
Yeah, okay. That also works. So essentially the point is we would have some privileged participant, or not privileged, but like chosen participant, the chosen one.
Exactly,
perhaps,
yeah.
who gets to add all the constants to that. So up there you had a fancy schmancy multiplication. So here you have x plus y, but before you had x plus y times some other variable.
Okay, so this part is the annoying part.
Okay.
So you can imagine that we did all of these things. Here if I was player 1, or participant 1, every time I see P1.
Player 1 works.
Because we play Counter-Strike together. So.
Yeah, there you go.
So here I would have 3x1. Yeah, that's my share, right? And here we would have like a temporary value. I would have x1 plus y1.
Yep.
On my side.
That's right.
You would have x2 plus y2, right? So how do we do this multiplication?
So the multiplication here, I assume, wouldn't just be by a constant, it would be by a new variable, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's,
so
it's
what
more
do you
interesting
want to call it?
if
W, maybe? Or
okay,
whatever you'd like.
Let's do W.
Okay.
So this is where it gets spicy, more spicier. It's like hot wings.
I like it.
And so you can see that if you do x1 times y1, if I do that on my side and you do that on your side, it doesn't really works.
Right.
Because x times y is equals to what?
x1 plus x. x2, right?
Right.
Times y1 plus y2, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Which is x1 plus y1. Oh, sorry. x1 y1, which is what I wrote here, and that I can compute it locally.
That's right.
Plus x2 y2.
So
you can compute that correctly.
I compute that. Yep.
Unfortunately, we get some cross products. x2 y1 plus x1 y2. And so this again, I have this, you have.
That's right.
But this we don't know how to compute. I mean, we know, but not yet.
I don't remember, so it's like I'm learning it, all new all over again.
You're solidifying that knowledge. Cool. So to resume, we have that. We can do it locally, but this it's a bit more complex. And again, spoiler, it's gonna involve communication.
Sure.
So what I explained to you last time is that there's a way to do this with homomorphic encryption.
Okay. So probably you should explain what homomorphic encryption is, or just really basically.
Or, I mean, any questions so far, I guess, or any things I can stop?
This to me is, perfectly clear so far. I essentially like the high level point here is like, great, we can compute two individual terms, but unfortunately that's not enough to compute the true product, which would be the product of the sums right now. Although here we have the sums of the products, right? So we're missing the cross terms. So the next natural question, of course, is, okay, great, we have those things. How do we compute the cross terms?
Right.
So clearly those depend on our secrets, respectively. So,
okay. So now multiplication, we enter a new chapter, and that's kind of going to suck a bit, but there's one way, so homomorphic encryption.
Okay.
Homomorphic encryption. And what is homomorphic encryption? It's very briefly, it's a public key encryption. So that means that someone has a private key to decrypt, and someone else has a public, or everybody has a public key that they can encrypt to, right? So there's a secret key and a public key. Don't really like that notation, but
we can call it whatever you want. I mean,
and people can encrypt with that scheme using the public key, different values, whatever. And so let's say you encrypt to me, right? And I can use my secret key to decrypt that. So far only, it's basic public key encryption.
Good so far.
But you can also do more operations with the ciphertext, which will preserve the operations inside the ciphertext, in the plain text.
That's right.
And so here we have different flavors of homomorphic encryption schemes. Here what we want is a homomorphic encryption scheme that supports addition. So we want to be able to, if you have two ciphertexts like that, you want to be able to add them with a special way of adding them, and such that it will give you the encryption of 3 plus 4.
So maybe the silly way of writing that, or saying it is, we can do, the two operations are the same. Either I encrypt two things and then add them together,
right?
Or I first add them together and then encrypt them. And those two things are identical, is what we're saying, for this particular type of encryption.
Exactly. And you can think, if you've never looked at encryption schemes that can do that, RSA can do that naturally, the vanilla version, or you can just look at these, like whenever you commit, just like when you look at discrete logarithms and you have some generator of a group, and you multiply these let's say two commitments, we would say in cryptography, then you get you get the addition here. The only problem is that you cannot decrypt this thing, so these are homomorphic commitment schemes usually that look like that, but not homomorphic encryption schemes.
Okay. I see.
Unless these values are small.
Yeah, I mean those values are small. It's very easy to do.
So actually, sometimes we do it, but usually we want a easier version. So there are schemes like Pellier, that French guy that invented that a while ago, and this is probably the kind of scheme you would want to use here to do this kind of addition.
Okay, and we only need addition. We don't need anything else. We don't need scaling or anything like that.
Scaling comes for free.
I guess it comes for free because it's finite fields, right?
Because you're adding something to itself multiple times. So addition and scaling, right?
Yep, that's right. Okay, great.
Okay, so now that I've introduced homomorphic encryption scheme, we're just gonna assume that's the last time I'm gonna explain anything about them. We're just gonna assume we have such a scheme.
Perfect.
And then we're gonna use it to see how we can compute this.
Okay.
Right?
I think so far so good. I mean, the only thing to, I guess, watch out for is it's not true just for 3 and 4, but it's true for, of course, any two values.
Oh no, it only works for 3 and 4.
Oh, okay. Well, that would be a very.
So it's gonna be very tricky.
Yeah. some big brain MPC programs. Okay. Anyway, so sorry.
All right. So the trick is, I guess you could pause and like try and think about it. And
oh man. It's like a real...
I think you could think about it. That's a fun puzzle. But one way to do it is that. I'm P1, I'm P2. So far, it's only between the two of us, but you can imagine if there were more participants, we would do that between every pair of participants, right?
Okay.
So what I'm gonna send to you is an encryption to my public key. So I'm encrypting to myself of my share.
Great, good so far.
All right. And what you're gonna do is that you're gonna take this thing and you're gonna also encrypt, you're gonna scale it by your y2 here. So you're gonna do y2 times, so this scaling operation times the thing I just sent you.
That's right.
And then you're gonna encrypt, with my public key still, you're gonna encrypt some random value. We're gonna call it alpha.
Right, okay, yeah.
Okay,
So I was like, if you didn't have that random value, then you would immediately know what my value is, right? Because you would be able to essentially divide by
Exactly. If you didn't have that,
right,
I'd be able to decrypt that and yeah.
And the reason why is because of the fact that this thing is homomorphic, that equals
right. What is
y2.
it equal to? Let's write it. I think it'll be better.
That's right. So
right?
The thing above the line and below the line are equivalent. So if alpha was 0, in other words, you sent no randomness, then we have a problem because of course you now know what y2 is. So that would be bad.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so you can imagine now I'm decrypting this as the first participant.
Perfect.
And now I'm getting this value, which is. Do you see where I'm going with it?
Well, yeah. So because alpha is, I assume, uniformly randomly chosen, then there's no way you could recover because you don't know what alpha is, right?
Right. So this looks random to me, right?
That's right.
And I'm gonna call that R1.
Yep. Perfect. For any value of y2, this should be uniformly random.
Right. And so no, basically we have that R, which is X times Y, is basically R1 plus R2. So now we recovered, or we obtained an additive sharing of this multiplication, where R2 is...
I assume it's going to be Y1, or Y1 times X2 minus alpha.
Oh,
right? Is that? Oh, no, did I?
Well, actually, I messed up here. R is not XY.
Okay.
It's only part of the equation here. So, okay. Forget what I said.
No, let's see it. Yeah, okay.
Here what we obtain is that R2 is minus alpha.
Okay.
And so what we obtain is a sharing of this value. So y2.x1.
Okay, so what you're saying is player 1 knows R1, and player 2, of course, knows negative alpha because they sent over alpha.
Right.
So we're saving that. So that's our share. And your share is this R1 that you've decrypted from the above.
From what you sent me.
Okay. So R1 specifically is the decryption of what I've sent you, right? So that's okay.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, good so far. So if we add those two together, then we're chilling. Great. We get y2 times x1 plus alpha minus alpha, right? And so you just get 1.
Exactly. So basically so what happened here is that we use a homomorphic encryption scheme to multiply like your value is my value and obtain an additive sharing of that.
Nice.
Right? And so you can imagine, right?
Yeah.
And so you can imagine that, so which one is this? Y2, X1, so it's this one. Now you can imagine that we can do the same for this one. So we would do the same protocol, but the other way. And basically basically we obtain enough shares to have an additive sharing of XY.
That's right.
There's a bit of jumping here, but hopefully that makes sense.
No, this is great, right? Because essentially what you've covered the method for constructing this, right? But of course, constructing this is just repeating the same protocol, just in the other direction. Instead of you giving me an encryption and I doing this operation, we just flip the labels around and you would then get this, right? And then we can of course recover, but now we have shares of this, we have a share of this, and then each of us know these two individual things.
Right.
And so summing all of them together then gives us the result, which is that we have now recovered the multiplication of our shared secret without necessarily knowing individual secrets of our own.
Yeah, and maybe we can just write it down, but at the end of that, my share would look like x1, y1 plus y2, x1 plus alpha, and then
and
plus,
right.
I should say, well, yeah, this is something that looks like that. I cannot see that, but which is called R1 previously. And here, what?
Also plus alpha prime, right?
Plus alpha prime.
Minus alpha prime, I guess. If there's a second, you sent me randomness, right?
But that's, here I would have used beta instead. And
for the, so this is for the other direction, for player 2 to player 1. So for me to you, you sent me randomness. So I sent you an encrypted thing, you then sent me randomness, and we're going to call it randomness beta.
It'd be me here, like we're reverting the protocol.
That's right. Okay. So that's player 1 knows this whole sum, right? And now of course player 2 will know, I believe here, let me see if I got this right, x2, y2, right, plus y1, x2, plus beta, and then minus alpha at the very end.
Yeah, correct.
Right.
Cool.
So in other words, the way to think about it is switch every 1 for every 2, right, and then switch these two around, right? And this I don't know if you want to write it down, but I think that's right.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. It sounded right to me.
Okay. So at a high level, essentially, we both, of course, have the two terms, and then we have the remaining term, the randomness, is two inverses of each other. So when you add them together,
Right.
you recover exactly the two terms that you want.
Alpha gets canceled, beta gets canceled.
Very nice. So now we have, okay.
So, yeah, let's recap. So we know how to go through this thing if we have shares, additive shares of like any secret inputs, and we can recover everything's for free except multiplication. And at the end, you get a share of some results. And basically, to get the outputs, everybody broadcasts or open their shares, and so everybody can recompute the output by adding them.
Right, adding them together.
Great.
Okay.
So from here, there's different directions to go into. There is how do we handle secrets, and so there's a way to not use additive sharings, but to use Shamir secret sharings instead. So your boxes, you don't have secrets x such that x equals x1 plus x2.
Okay.
We don't use that anymore. We use a different way.
Okay.
Or I can explain the actual way that the modern schemes do multiplication, which is they actually, some schemes will use that, but the heavy duty schemes like speeds, these kind of more modern schemes will use a different way to do multiplication that involves that pre-processing that I mentioned earlier.
Interesting. So we'll clip it here, and then from here, if you're interested, feel free to watch the next set of videos.